Welcome back to Dominate Your Day. I'm Dana Williams and I am with Mariana Fagnilli. Did I say it right? Did I say it right? We practiced that. So, Mariana and I met through an amazing event we just had this week called Women We Admire, sponsored by AT&T. And I just fell in love with Mariana and what she's doing in the world. She lives in Boston, in the process of moving to Spain. But Mariana has some interesting background that I want you guys to really learn about. She has been an attorney. She is a leader in the absolute space of helping diversity and inclusion. She's got over 20 years of senior leadership experience, and she's pioneered this concept of inclusion driven performance. Welcome, Mariana. We are so excited to have you
Thank
today.
you, thank you, thank you for having me. And yes, it was absolutely amazing meeting you in person the other day. What a great panel at AT&T with Women We Admire, and I'm excited to continue the conversation because that was just kind of a teaser this week.
Yes. Well, what we talked about this week was well-being, or yeah, we talked about well-being, and you talked about community. And you had so many great gold golden bombshells, I think, that you brought into the room when you brought messaging. We're at a time right now with the culture changing, with everything changing, and what does DE and I mean? What does diversity inclusion mean? And I love how you've pivoted with purpose and how you've been building your business around this initiative and how you're changing. So, talk to the leaders out there right now that are trying to figure this out. What is your advice to people in the workplace right now with the recent changes?
So many changes, right? And people are leading, through chaos because there's not much clarity in messaging right now. There's a clear pushback, and I will say honestly, the pushback is a no. The pushback has been happening for a while.
Mhm.
And I will be the first person to recognize that the pushback exists in part because DEI, as we traditionally know it, has failed to fulfill its promise. The truth is, for a
Mm.
long time, and I'm not acknowledging how DI came to be, right? We're talking about social justice and civil rights movements, and all that is at the basis of the work of DEI. However, we also for a long time have been pointing at McKinsey's report from 2015 and how more diverse teams outperform homogeneous teams. And when we talk about these, we have to ensure that when we talk about homogeneous teams, I'm talking about any kind of homogeneous team. If I had a team of just Latinas, we wouldn't be as high performing as other more diverse teams. So this isn't about saying that any group that has diversity that is non-white it's going to outperform my better decisions. So we have to recognize that as the first thing. But then the truth is a lot of organizations, most of them, have only performed at the traditional, what I call traditional DEI level, which is forgetting or not finding a way to really link these efforts within the organization and linking them to performance and driving performance through inclusion. So I have in this process developed inclusion driven performance, which is a framework of 5 steps that are not going to be foreign to anyone who has done this work, but they are very well
Mhm.
organized to go from obtaining the commitment and really having company leadership on board to actually going through a cultural transformation that is needed, inclusive behaviors, which are nothing more than effective behaviors, because I say if today we are not inclusive in our leadership, who are we leading? um,
Mm.
then we move into bringing a structural integration. So a structure within the organization, working through policies and practices and systems to ensure that they are welcoming of everyone, that we are bringing everyone together. that those policies
Mm,
and systems are going to help and support those effective behaviors that we want leaders to exercise. And then something really fun that I call the innovation acceleration process, which is creating diverse by design teams purposefully,
mhm,
with purpose in mind, meaning not just diversity for diversity's sake, not just the 5 or 7 categories of diversity that we usually go for, but really thinking about diversity in the broadest way, creating these teams and accelerating innovation by giving them the tools they need to be inclusive and high performing. And then ultimately measurement, measurement and looking at what, how we are going to continue to optimize our processes. But, you know, we are in such difficult times today that I felt, and actually the book and inclusion driven performance was born over a year ago now. So this moment in time was maybe, when I wrote it, um,
I knew it.
because
Maybe you kn
I think that regardless of the environment, this evolution was a must. I mean,
yeah,
working for so long in this area in organizations, I was even frustrated. That the truth is, I was even frustrated that we were not moving the needle. And so I am hoping that this framework is going to help anyone, not just DEI professionals, anyone who wants to truly
mhm.
embed inclusion into the organization to really accelerate performance, both individual, team, and well, actually, and corporate performance, right? So um, it is the next it is the next thing to do if we want to really elevate this element of inclusion, which is extremely important to achieve high performance.
One of the things you and I talked about this week that I think is important to note is how you're positioning inclusion
Yeah.
now and what how you're branding it. And just for those who are listening in that we didn't really go deep, but tell everybody a little bit about your background. And because I think that is noteworthy of how you have been building this opportunity to help people in the workplace.
I got to this point because I'm a lawyer. I graduated first as an international human rights lawyer. Then I did my master's in international corporate law, and I worked the first mm, good part, 1/3 of my career, let's just say, in legal, right, mostly international law work. But then I went into pharma. I spent good 10 years at Johnson and Johnson, where I discovered DEI, but I was working in government affairs and policy, and so that opportunity opened the world to open a world of opportunities to the rest of the countries that were
Mhm.
struggling with really getting new medicines and treatments for maybe underserved communities. And so I always saw and had an opportunity to practice inclusion through the eyes of the business. I learned HR
Mm.
later. I learned HR later. When I wanted to really be well grounded into how we advance this work. But initially, my work into the NI was through the business lens. Launching healthcare disparities programs, launching diversity clinical trials programs, and so after working in government affairs and policy and healthcare policy for a long time, and I spent in pharma almost 20 years of my career, I thought I want to pivot to DEI. And so now everything that I did externally was going to start being done internally. And I wanted to change industries because I thought I know how to do this in pharma, and I always looking for a challenge. I'm going to go to an industry that has maybe is more conservative. So I went into financial services. I spent almost 4 years in financial services. I'm not dummy. I went to a Fortune 100 company, so there's a lot of resources and there's a lot of commitment to do this work, but it did work. I mean, I work for Liberty Mutual, which is a phenomenal organization who opened their, eyes and ears into these new crazy opportunities that I was bringing to the team, and we embrace inclusion at a global level. in less than 2 years in a very well structured way, which by now you and your audience know I like structured things to
Yeah.
measure them and make them work. And
Yes.
and so I started after I left Liberty to consult with several organizations, because I had been consulting here and there, kind of with friends, and then decided I think that this way of thinking about inclusion in the next evolution is something that I don't want to hold for one company, which is the one that I work, but if I can help and continue to help others to really advance this work, and that's when I decided to go consulting, because I I it we were talking about women the other day, and sometimes the struggles that we have, and one of the things that I
Mm.
personally struggled with was, I think inclusion driven performance is a phenomenal and innovating framework, and this evolution that I'm positioning is really where we all need to go. But I'm saying that with a lot of certainty and courage right now. 2 years ago, when I was creating this, I thought, who the heck am I to tell the rest of the world what inclusion should look like? And I'm like, no, I'm going to own it. And so I that's what I'm doing. I'm owning it. I really believe that organizations that bring inclusion driven performance are going to succeed and are going to beat the competition.
And this is one thing I want our listeners to note. So, Mariana has trademarked inclusion driven performance. And I love that you said something that we all kind of find ourselves doing, no matter if we're creating something new or we're developing something. We always kind of have that, should I be doing this? And, but you have the courage, but it's stepping forward and saying, no, I see the need and I'm going to write this book, Inclusion Driven Performance, and give people this framework. Not only that, I'm going to give them a new way to look at inclusion.
Yeah.
And so back to that other question I started to ask before I had you go back to your history, what how are you branding it now?
Inclusion at the center, and inclusion for unlocking human potential and achieving organizational excellence. And that's why it's a critical element of this work. And why inclusion? Because when I said earlier, I do believe DI failed to fulfill its promise, is because forgetting the political environment, the truth is
Mhm.
many of us have had experience decisions organizations have made in the name of DEI that were based on everything but merit. And we
Mm,
have left people behind who deserve either the opportunity for a promotion, or the opportunity for a job, or the opportunity for the sexy assignment, um,
mhm,
because they didn't fit in a protected category. And
mm,
inclusion is about everyone. I mean,
mm,
at which point we decided to tell white males that they were allies and they should sit on the sideline until we call them to be allies of ours. No, we all have a
mm,
story, right? And
mhm,
I can only talk for Latina women. We're all different too, right? So
mhm,
we talk about building community the other day, and we talk about the importance of building community, of being part of a community, but you cannot do that without authenticity and how you elevate your uniqueness. And that is where I'm pivoting to. Inclusion is about everyone, and it's not about where in these buckets you fit in, I'm sorry. um, but what is your unique value proposition that you bring to the table, that we all have undoubtedly, and that we need to
mhm.
start elevating for good.
I love that. And I think one of the things, the word uniqueness that we talked about and we continue, you're kind of holding that as the handle for this, right? Is that kind
Yeah,
of your positioning for this? Is that it's not about in color or sex or race. It's
all
about,
of
hey, let's look at you and how unique you
exactly.
are.
Exactly. And let
So,
me let me just say, eh,
yeah.
DEI, DNI, inclusion, whatever we want to call it, inclusion driven performance, none of it is easy. Okay. And I know that it's
Right.
easier when we put people into buckets and say, okay, so all of you are going to be served by this. All of you are going to be served by that. And I understand that talking
Mm.
about uniqueness may scare the hell out of companies because it's like, oh my God, I cannot tailor the workplace to every individual. But for the longest time, since I'm doing this work, I've said exactly this. I've said this work is about bringing humanity into the workplace because every individual needs to be valued for who they are, not the bucket that you want to make them fit in.
Mm.
And that uniqueness is that value proposition that is going to make a difference in your organization. And so that authenticity can only be brought and recognized by the organization like that. And organizations can find ways to really tailor the workplace to every employee.
To me, it feels like a breath of fresh air of just, I can just see everybody as a human and unique and not get caught up in some rules, right? Is that what I'm
Exactly.
hearing?
Yeah. And listen, we all want to be recognized for who we are. And it's much easier
Absolutely.
to be authentic when you don't have to fit into some category that someone is, judging you by. Um,
Exactly.
I never said this out loud, so I'm thinking of this as we are talking. But I know,
Sure.
reflection of mine is I came to this country 24 years ago from Argentina, and as soon as I crossed the border, I was both a, a Latina, I wasn't before, and I was a woman of color, I wasn't before. And it took
Interesting.
me a long time to make myself fit into these categories that for 24 years I had never experienced. Uh,
Mm.
I love being part of the Latino community. They opened the door to me because I never recognized myself as Latina. Um, I became a voice for the Latino community, and I understand a lot more of the community that I did 20 years ago, 24 years ago. But I'm not just that, and I'm so many other things. For example, I only started talking about my dyslexia a few years back because I didn't even understand myself that dyslexia was make me different, and I needed from the workplace certain things that and even if you were going to spell something for me right now, I'd be like, my God, what again, what again? Because it takes me forever to put together the sound and the letter, right? Or
Right.
when I read something, being in a meeting for me is nerve wracking when I have to process information fast, because when I have to read every sentence I read to process, it takes me probably 3 times. So,
Mm.
but I bring that too. And we bring a lot of different things, and this is who we are. And this is the value that we individually bring to the table.
This is what I love about using Clifton Strengths as a tool with my clients, and you and I talked about that too, is it's at its basis, it's about uniqueness. It's about how you're 1 in 33 million, you're never gonna find somebody else like you, and why not live in that every
Exactly.
day? And, yeah, and we talked about that too. One of the things I think we tend to do is wanna compare ourselves with other people, but that is not what we're meant to do. We're meant to be our unique self. So I love that you bring all of that with you. You know, what that must have felt like to go 24 years of your life and then move into a whole new situation where you had to look at yourself differently. And how did you find your authentic brand when you were transitioning and getting to the United States and got your degrees? And did you get your degree in
Both,
Argentina and law?
both,
Or both? Got both of them there.
both
And then you
in
brought that
Argentina
to
and the US. Yeah.
and the US. So you brought, yeah, and I know you've had amazing background in education and finance and pharma. So what did you learn on this journey? What are some of the lessons you learned that you'd like to share with others as you went from, coming to the United States to study and then to get into corporate America and make a difference, and now you're kind of blossoming into a new opportunity with this book and everything else you're doing. What were some lessons you
Oh,
learned?
we don't have time in this podcast to go through all the lessons, but I think the one thing that I'm going to say that I thank God learned really early in my career was to always pay it forward. That to be with
Mm,
me. right?
Mm.
I
Love.
love connecting people to other with other people because I think that they can do magic together. And for me, it was difficult. My journey in corporate America was hard because I wasn't aware of the unwritten rules. So always read the unwritten rules. um, and but don't I mean do not lose yourself in the process of trying to to fit into an organization. I uh, the organization that is going to welcome you is an organization where you have to feel that you belong, you have to feel that you're heard, you have to feel seen. um, Again,
Mhm.
it's a journey that is not always easy. You have to find your champions. The sooner you find a
Mm.
mentor and a sponsor, the better. I wish I knew that early on. It was 6 years
Mhm.
in or 7 years in when I'm like, oh, the word sponsor came through, and I'm like, wow, what is that? And I had have a sponsor since that moment, and you need people that are going to have your back. But again, I'm going to say something that we said the other day: find your community, because in your community you can find
Mm.
comfort, you can find support, you can find people that think like yourself. You can grow by ensuring that that community has diversity in it, and again, diversity in a broader way, so that you can learn from people that are different than yourself. And
Mhm.
community gives you also mental and physical health. And
Mm.
we cannot get, we don't have opportunities to not think about that. And check you check your balance every day. I always say
Mhm.
you're not going to need the same thing every day. Your balance may be, you may need less of something or more of something every day, and allow yourself to take those 5 minutes that you need to figure out what your day is going to be like, and what you need and what you don't need that day.
Mm.
Because we all tend to go through a routine and go go go, and not take a
Mm.
pause, and both in life, like
Mm.
we are saying, in our careers, but also to do this inclusion driven performance work, to be accountable leaders, inclusive leaders. We need to learn to pause. We need to learn to bring others to the conversation, people that don't have our same experiences, so that they can help us make decisions. I always say, at the end of the day, this is about those decision making moments and how we face them. So take
Mm.
time on the
Mhm.
pause and bring others to the
Mm.
conversation, so that they can help you think differently and in a new light about the things that you have in front of yourself.
Mariana, I love that, own the pause and really live intentionally each day, just and realize each day is going to be so different, right? The leader you are right now is going to be different than the leader you're going to need to be 6 months from now or a year from now. Look at just the practice of inclusion and how that's transformed. So I want to talk a little bit about your book
Yeah.
and who you wrote that for. You talked about the five frameworks early in our interview today, but I'd love to hear, who is this for? Who did you have in mind when you were writing this?
um Everyone that I ever worked for, I had in mind. um
CEOs,
Everyone,
leaders,
because I
everybody.
think that truly, this work has to be done on every level of the organization. It cannot be top down or bottom up, right? A lot of organizations create ERGs and let them be, and expect that from the bottom up, the organization suddenly is going to go through a transformation. And that intention, that purpose that you're describing so well, only happens when everyone at every level of the organization is in alignment. So the book is really for anyone who wants to be utilize and leverage inclusion as a driver of performance. And that is the same
Mm,
as saying to leverage the diversity you have as a lever of an element of performance, because ultimately we look around and
mm,
our teams are diverse one way or another. If we bring intentional inclusion, we're going to have higher performance. But you have to give
mm,
those teams the tools that I'm mentioning in the book in order to succeed, because diversity for diversity's sake is messy, and if we don't know how to manage it, it's not going to be successful. And then the problem is, oh, diversity doesn't really work. Well, diversity works, but it takes intention. And so the book really, it could be for senior executives more so, I will say today, because they are the ones struggling with pivoting. Okay, we knew the AI was X, Y, and Z. How do we do it now? So for those people, my God, yes, absolutely, absolutely, because you can solve it immediately. you know,
Yes.
we don't have to struggle through these. We just need to continue evolving.
Yeah. So for those of you that are leading diversity in your companies, or that you have that in your title, get Mariana's book and look at her frameworks and look at it differently. You talked about ERGs, employee resource groups. What is the future of ERGs, and what are
Ooh.
you seeing right now as the trend with all the changes?
So I think the ERGs, as part of this work, need to evolve as well. Part of the work I've been doing with companies now for a very long time is leveraging the ERGs for in a different way, as innovation accelerators. So what I've done in
Mm,
several companies, and I have a detail how to do this in my book, is bring members of the ERGs together and others in the organization to be more inclusive in that approach, and build, for example, a multicultural advisory council. Ask the organization to give you a few of the challenges they may have, and this could be anything from reviewing benefits and revamping benefits to a specific, I don't know, leave policies, or it could be marketing opportunities, so internal or external. And you create these teams with the ERGs to showcase the value they really have. A lot of companies give certain power to the ERGs, but the ERGs are pretty much event planners. And I'm not saying there's anything bad with that. The problem is a lot of your organizations have ERG events every day of the week. What are we doing with that? How are we being intentional? What is the outcome of that? What are the takeaways? What are people doing with that information? What is the company doing with that information? It can be for information overload. But if we help the ERG's position as innovation hubs, then we can
mhm.
truly start appreciating and leveraging and embracing that diversity that they bring for accelerating innovation, for creating more, better solutions, for really looking into opportunities the organization may be sitting on without the right input. And so I think the future of the ERGs, in a way, it's being forced to evolve with the rest of the diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. It must, but organizations need to start leveraging ERGs differently and giving them a seat at the table in that sense. Now, the ERGs also have to go through an evolution, and you cannot go, you know, overnight through that evolution. So I urge organizations to do this. I urge ERGs to ask for this. It's not impossible, actually, and it's a lot of fun, and it's absolutely incredible what could come out of giving this opportunity to the employee resource groups, employee networks, or however we want to call them. Um, they are, even before you go into these diverse by design teams opportunities that I mentioned, your go-to people, because the diversity of thought is already there. You have to enhance that, because you probably have very limited representation in terms of all the opportunities of diversity that you have in the organization, but huge, huge, huge opportunity for leveraging and unlocking potential.
So I love that how you're talking about these groups. Is this another thing that needs to be rebranded?
Yeah, I just wrote a paper about this because I was going to write a second book on this, and then I pivoted, and I'm writing a second book on human connection. But yeah, I'm going to be probably publishing this in LinkedIn in a few weeks. But I think that because I'm finishing a framework for ERGs to do this, but yes, I think that we need, and let me pause for a second. We mentioned the political environment. There's going to be legal challenges. I think ERGs or companies with ERGs and the way the ERGs are performing work right now may present some legal challenges sooner or later. And so, because of this lack of whole inclusion that you may have in the representation of ERGs, right? And so, I think that if I were today seeing an organization, I'd be doing a legal assessment of what the potential challenge could be and start building solutions that are, again, nothing more than the evolution of this work. So, yeah.
That's a great point, and I think it's just taking time to just if you were coming into a new company and just doing a listening tour, you're just listening and figuring out and then seeing where the legal implications are, what's missing, how should this be rebranded. One of the things that struck me when you were talking about the innovation stage of developing these groups and what they can do, but also the importance of the measurement, which is part of your trademark
Yeah.
program that you've got as we measure this, is we measure inclusion driven performance.
Yeah.
So how, and I love the fact of taking time to assess where you are as a corporation or organization, and then make some of these changes. Have you got any examples recently, or is this so new that because it has just happened in the last, what, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, something like that? Or examples of companies that are pivoting with purpose right now as they're seeing that. You're probably just starting this work and your book's just now coming out, so I'm just curious.
So, I mean,
Yes.
I've seen a lot of organizations doing this work really well for the last 20 years. So, I'm not going to say that in the sense of a measurement and how we advance in this work, no company has figured this out. A lot of companies have, and they are great examples. There may be um, they may they're going to they're even going to thrive during this time because they're already going in that direction. uh, but I did come up with a framework for measurement that I haven't necessarily seen before. And this
Really?
and this conversation on on measurement, and what are the metrics for DEI, has been a struggle for a lot of organizations, frankly. And so what I'm saying is, let's move away. Not saying let's move away, but let's evolve the measurement too. Representation, sure, we can measure it. To what end? We have to be careful. There's legal implications to knowing specific, representation numbers, or for aiming for some representation numbers. I always say about representation, be strategic about the representation. It doesn't really matter what other companies are doing, because we all do benchmark. I want to be better than our competitors. What works for you? What is that you need? What is your market opportunity? Um, and each organization is going to have a different answer for these. But I'm talking about measuring, for example, a company that has patents. Measure your patent applications today versus once you start building this these innovation acceleration teams, how they are doing versus being not intentional about having diverse teams. Measure financial performance once you have these structures in place versus where you are today. We don't do that.
Mhm.
I wrote an article for advice for investors on and board members. How do you actually ensure the organization is doing DI right by these different levels of measurement, which DI, I'm sure, is not taken into consideration, because DI usually measures representation, measures hire, measures promotions, and that's fine, but that's very limiting. That's
Mhm.
not organizational performance. So how you go from that,
Mhm.
from where we are to the next, is each organization needs to look at the different opportunities in marketing, in commercialization, in communications, in brand recognition, and how we can measure the impact that inclusion is having in those performance indicators. But problem is we
Mm.
are missing these purposeful inclusion frameworks in the middle. And without
Ah.
that, then how are we going to measure the future? So it's going to take time. You can start measuring today, and as you're implementing changes, you continue to measure, and you're going to see the evolution of this work. But I think that we need to truly evolve how we measure, because otherwise, how we're going to be successful.
Wow, Mariana, I think you're going to be really busy helping people because it is like it's innovating, it's starting new work, it's starting to look at things differently, it's repositioning. When you talked about taking these ERG groups and not just having them do events, but having them think about and be that, it's almost like they're a focus group. It's almost like you're like what I
Exactly.
would say a group that we go and say, tell us what you like, what you don't like. What is, it's amazing to think about this new 2.0 of what this looks like and how to build this
Yeah, and I
out.
think I'd make it part of a structure as opposed to a one-off. Oh, maybe we lost the ERGs. No, make it be part of the structure of the organization. So instead of the ERGs, I had a leader a long time ago, who I convinced him to be the sponsor of the ERG I was leading, and he soon realized, and he said it out loud, and it was phenomenal because it put a lot of other people, at shame. He said, "ERGs, they're just, where HR dumps all the stuff they don't want to do," and for a
Mm,
long time, and in a lot of companies, it's still the case. And so, ERGs want to do so much more, and they have the capacity, but the companies have not matured in that way. And so, and a
mhm,
lot of organizations are fearful of how much space we give to the ERGs. Give them all the space, but
mm,
structure it. I mean, the one thing I want to say is structure it from day one, because otherwise, you also know ERGs can go rogue and it's very hard to pull them back in. So have a structure from day
mhm.
one. Be very clear. Just like you have a strategy for anything else in the organization, this has to have a strategy too. It's not whatever they want to do, is what you both agree this is going to look like. And it can be done, and there are companies that are doing this phenomenally. Ultimately, what I will say is, for inclusion overall, what we are looking in organizations is higher collaboration, right? And there was this one thing. Last October, I was attending the World Economic Forum Future Councils meeting, and everything is discussed in these meetings. We are trying to solve the world's most pressing issues, and my conclusion, as hearing everyone and someone said, is to solve the world's most pressing problems, we need to achieve international collaboration. And yet today in 2024, they said, is the hardest thing to do because we cannot work past differences.
Mm,
So the key element to achieve that international collaboration to solve issues that we all suffer from, because it's not other people, it's our own problems and future problems,
wow.
is to be inclusive.
Mm, mhm. And
You
unique,
know,
right?
I appreciate that uniqueness, appreciate those differences, embrace them, and use them or leverage them for finding better solutions. So at the core, every company needs collaboration among their employees, right? Because that's what's going to build high performing teams. But it's not about throwing people into a room. It's about selecting the right people, giving them the tools to lead through their own differences, and then you're going to
Mhm.
see those results.
That is so exciting. Mariana, as we get ready to close out, is there anything that's coming up for you right now that you want to share with the audience? And we'll give them, the links to your book and all that. But is there anything that's coming up for you right now? If you could talk to these leaders that are just kind of confused and maybe even frustrated right now, they might be even stuck because they're trying to repurpose what they've been doing probably for the last 10
Yeah,
years. What would be your thoughts or any other thoughts that you have for them as they're
yeah.
leading uh, uniqueness, leading
I
humanity?
think, I think is just don't be afraid of the time. Chaos is paralyzing, um, but look ahead and be
Mm,
strategic. If we have to speak differently, message differently, but also pivot to measure other things that may not make you comfortable, and you may not have the resources today to do it, but it will take you some time to build them. Just, I think this is a moment. to be courageous and brave and unlock that creativity that you have, because we need creativity to go through these times and to go through this evolution regardless of the times, and really be
Mhm.
successful at the end of it. um, a lot of a lot of DI professionals themselves may feel like, well, I don't know how to get this, how do I embed really this into the business, how do I create these measurements, or get finance, for example, to start measuring this or that, or brand. I think that reconsidering how we DI is truly embedded, and maybe start partnering more on decision making with these teams in order to start testing how inclusion really is going to give them a
Mhm.
winning edge. Just this is time to be brave and creative, and push in the direction that is going to resonate with your leaders. Don't I don't think it's the
Mhm.
time to fight for whatever more romantic idea of DI we may have. um, this is
Mhm.
about being practical, and being and making an impact to the business. And yes, we're not leaving people behind for that. We're actually protecting them, because if our business goes under or has a legal challenge or is in any um, trouble because of DI alone or other issues, then people don't have jobs to be protected, right? And so we need organizations to stay strong, and we need to pivot with organizations.
I love that. I think one of the key elements of a leader today is agility and be able to do what you did. You were in the middle of writing this book and you changed and you have pivoted and you got it. You took your amazing model and applied it to today's culture.
Yeah,
Um,
and listen, there's going to be pushback, okay? Because a lot of people like the traditional way of doing DI, but everyone
mhm,
needs to evolve. And guess what? There's going to be pushback anyways. So the
that's right.
first thing also to do is, this is not a popularity contest. This is about doing the right
Yeah.
thing and doing it right, and helping organizations succeed, and people and unlock people's potential, right? So everyone around also the chief diversity officers and everyone doing DI needs a mindset change, and that's not going to be
Mm.
easy. So yes, be ready for the pushback.
And you said something too. You said it's we can't keep just staying traditional ways and looking and trying to get that to change. That would be frustrating, right? So I love how this is a time to be brave. This is a time to really think differently, and I love that. Mariana, how can people reach you if they want to reach out and get some consulting from you? You have an amazing background to come alongside. I know I would want you at my side if I was leading a organization around inclusion. And so what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
We can share with the audience my contact information, but my website is fagniligroup.com, and all my contact information is there, and there's resources there. I'm a fan of LinkedIn, so anyone who wants to email me LinkedIn, message me, or because I share most of my resources in LinkedIn, and I connect with people every day on LinkedIn, so happy to use that too as a channel.
That's great. Well, I look forward to following you and reading the articles that you've got coming out, seeing your book when it comes out. And what's the next one about, did you
Human
say?
connection.
It's about community.
Human connection. Because as we are talking about all these topics, uh, I think that that's something that we cannot lose sight, that continues to be core. So how do we build community? How do we stay authentic? How do we elevate our uniqueness and make it a valuable position? And human connection, the social capital is absolutely necessary for success, both personally and professionally. So how do we build these frameworks within organizations to support that?
Mariana, I could talk to you for another hour. I love what you're sharing, and I love how you're helping us think differently about this and about inclusion. Can't wait to read your book. Can't wait to have you back next year for the next
Yes.
book. Thank you so much for being here
Thank
today
you.
with us and sharing your insight. And I love your passion, and thank you for being authentically you. Just really appreciate
Thank
it.
you, Dana.
Mhm. Bye.